Okay, I think we're live. Hi, this is Charlie Zeese, and joining me today is Lisa Richards. And this is Pyramid Quest for Monday, June 13th, 2020. Do I have the right date? July 13th. Sorry, wrong month.
Yep.
Time's flying. Anyway,
That's okay.
we're glad you're here, and I hope that most of you saw the videos that I put out making another announcement over the weekend that we are now broadcasting from the Pyramid Science Foundation YouTube page. So I hope that more of you are able to join us today, and more will continue to do so as you learn about our new location. I also put out a notice that this week and next week, I'm going to be doing a review of all of the relevant research that we've been doing over the last several years, as well as the Russian research and also the research that many other scientists have done that brings a lot of this information together for us. And so today is going to be part one of that, and then next week we're going to have part two. But I do want to announce something that we're looking forward to in August. This is going to be Monday, August the 3rd. We're actually going to have on the show Grandma Chandra, who Lisa talked about last week. And I'll let Lisa talk about this in just a minute. But Lisa, as you may remember, Lisa read a piece at the end of last week's session that said that the 7-7 gateway on July 7th will activate all of Gaia's pyramids that you've been working on, and went on to talk about these various changes. And at the end, it said that you can also ask for clarity in your meditations or call on me to come assist you. Well, I didn't know if that call on me meant a phone call, but I never want to be embarrassed to call. So I called them over the weekend. And I did hear back from her mother, and we are happy to announce that we're actually going to have an entire session with her on our live stream on Monday, August the 3rd. And I'm going to turn it over to Lisa, because Lisa is actually going to do the interview. She's been nice enough to talk about it, but Grandma Chandra is actually a mute, and so her mother said that it might be better for someone who's a bit more psychic than me to do the interview. So anyway, Lisa, you might want to just talk briefly about what you're thinking about doing, or whatever, but I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, I don't even know what I'm going to do yet. I have some ideas in mind and questions, of course, but so Grandma Chandra, even though her name is Grandma, she is fairly young. I mean, she's not, I'd say she's probably in her 30s, 40s, something like that.
Probably.
So she's a mute. So she doesn't communicate through her voice. She communicates telepathically, and she can communicate with her mother, who is her main interpreter. But usually for outside interviews, it seems they get other interpreters. She's also been communicating with different elders, Native American elders, people like that as well. And she communicates with other people telepathically. I'm not really sure how her sessions go yet, but I believe it would be similar to, just someone meditating and connecting with her telepathically to receive the downloads from her. And she's super powerful. It's going to be kind of an odd interview, though, because she is mute. So we're going to have the translator there as well. So if you guys have any questions that you want to throw out to her, like Charlie said, she predicted last Tuesday on 7/7 that the gateway was going to open up all the pyramids and all the information about the pyramids to all of us. And people will be flocking to those who are teaching about pyramids. That's more people will be coming to people like Charlie and I about pyramid information and wanting to learn more and more about these. So we're excited about this information. We're excited to have her as a guest on the show as well.
That's right. And if I forgot to mention it, the reason why this is so relevant, I was meditating Tuesday morning on the 7th, and I've been in the process of putting together in the last week or so a draft, which is actually going to be the basis of the next 2 weeks presentation here on the live stream for funding for the foundation. So as I was doing that, it hit me that I'm getting such a good outline that it's time to write a book. So I am now committed, and to have that occur and become crystallized and crystal clear to me on the 7th was really what motivated me to go ahead and contact them last weekend. So I'm excited to announce that. I have at least a working title, which is Russian Pyramids Rediscovering Ancient Technology. And, that's what we know. I'm hoping to have the book out. This is at least a goal on July 7th of next year. So that's the goal that I'm shooting for. So I'm very excited about that. But before I start
Awesome.
Yeah. Before I start, though, I want to let Lisa have an opportunity to talk about new products and also where you can find them and some new information that she has up on her Etsy page.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so I have a couple of new products I've been meaning to get on my site for a long time. So if any of you are interested, I now have the caduceus coils that I made available for purchase. I'm going to add other ones too as I make them. I'll offer ones with just the bionized quartz sand, ones with specific crystals, and ones with intuitive design. But for now, I have the caduceus coil that I showed on the show last week. It has the shungite powder in it, the bionized quartz sand, and what else?
You have some magnetite?
Oh, copper particles.
Copper.
Oh, I'm sorry. This one has magnetite. Yeah, it was magnetite, not shungite. I apologize. So I'm using the magnetite powder, the bionized quartz sand, and some copper shavings that are inside the coil, and then it's wrapped with the copper wire as well. It's really powerful. And then I also have one of my other new products. It's going to be, it's a capstone, a custom capstone, and the name is Morpheus, because it's going to transform the EMFs around you. And Charlie and I were just touching base on 5G before we started the show today. It's funny because he didn't even know that I put that capstone up there for sale right before the show. So, but yeah, it's going to be focused on transforming the negative energies around you, especially the 5G. It has shungite powder in the middle of it. All through it. It has a Lemurian quartz crystal in the center, black tourmaline on the top. But that's listed on my Etsy shop. And then the Russian doll pyramid. I have two different options. The Russian doll pyramid is 3 pyramids in one. So anytime you put the smaller object of a pyramid inside the larger shape of the same geometry, it's going to amplify that energy. So we have 3 in 1 with the capstone. It's a custom capstone. It's called the Russian doll. And then we also have it's just a Russian doll amplifier. We had that on the show 1 week, and Lori tested it for us when she was on, and we put it underneath the chair. One of my clients actually wanted that specific one. She was so excited when she saw it, and she said it takes her to the 5th dimension immediately, just that 3-in-1 Russian doll pyramid underneath her meditation chair or on her amplifier when she's using it. But a lot of people are getting great results with these products. So check them out. Check out the descriptions on my Etsy shop. If you have any questions, let me know. And if you have any design ideas too, let me know as well. That's actually how the Russian doll design came about. One of my clients messaged me and wanted me to build something like that. And it took me a couple months, but I figured it out, and that's how it came to be. So yeah, lots of products going on, and we even have more designs in the making.
Well, to follow up a little bit on the EMFs, because I did want to talk about that, I've been downloading or being nudged to follow up on 5G as well in a big way. And some of the information that I'll be talking about over the next 2 weeks about how the pyramid geometry itself is working really plays into that. But one of the things that I've been noticing since the beginning of the stock market rebound after the crash from COVID is that Tesla stock has just been going crazy. And there's no way that it could rationally be doing that based upon his automobiles, which are all blowing up. But Tesla stock is now valued higher than any automobile manufacturer in the world, which just doesn't make sense. But what does make sense is the fact that people are seeing potential, and this may be the answer, in the huge satellite system to promote 5G technology, or to push it on the public that's going on around the world. As we get into more and more of the information that I'll be discussing today, you're going to start to see how important geometry and frequency and all of this is in our lives and in our health and so forth. But I get the feeling, even if there's nothing nefarious that's going on specifically with, purposefully, I should say, with Tesla's, satellite systems, we're all going to be bombarded with this sooner rather than later. And from my own previous research, I know there's at least 7,000 scientific studies that talk about the health impacts of 5G. So we all need to start thinking about this as we get into the method of action over the next 2 weeks as well. We're going to see that I think there's going to be ways that we can really use the pyramid geometry in a positive way to remediate the exposures to 5G. So a lot of research as well, and to put another pitch in for the Pyramid Science Foundation. Yes, we're going after institutional money, but we need support from you all as well. And when that begins, we're going to start doing, getting our research done more quickly. So anyway, with that said, I'll start a screen share now, and we can start with the presentation. This is actually a working draft of the information that I'm putting together for the Science Foundation to go after grant funding. So I'm just going to read you this introductory statement. It's still in draft form, but it'll give you a flavor of what we're going to be trying to do. And of course, your personal contributions to the foundation will help with this research. So I start out just saying thank you for your interest in the work of the Pyramid Science Foundation. I hope you will find the foundation's mission one with which you will share common interest and passion. I'm aware that the funding of scientific research for pyramids may sound a bit unusual. However, the extensive scientific research previously performed on these pyramids in Russia, the research that we have done demonstrating mankind's knowledge and use of this geometry for thousands of years, the existential importance of this geometry in the creative process in nature, and the interdisciplinary research demonstrating the method of action of these pyramids will hopefully give you reason to consider our funding request. The reason I was originally attracted to the Russian pyramids was the rigorous scientific research demonstrating the benefits of these pyramids. Without it, I probably would have never ventured any further. Now that I have been able to, quote, rediscover the geometry of these pyramids, information that has never been revealed in the West, I have completed what is likely the most comprehensive scientific, geometric, archaeological, and historical research regarding these pyramids that exists outside of Russia. The information contained herein represents just a portion of the underlying research and information I've compiled, and I would be pleased to provide other research I and others have undertaken to assist you in your evaluation process. I'm currently in the process of compiling this information and more into a book tentatively titled Russian Pyramids Rediscovering Ancient Technology. And then I go on to talk about the proposal and so forth. So that gives you some context. Here's a table of contents. We're going to be using this as an outline over the next 2 weeks, but you can see we're going to talk about the foundation a little bit, what pyramids are, the highlights of the health research. I'm not going to go into anything more than that, unless we have time at the end of next week. And then the summaries of each of the experiments that's been done on health research. And then this is where kind of my original research starts off, looking at sacred geometry and the pyramid's method of action, rediscovering the geometry itself, something that had not been disclosed until I was able to figure it out about a year and a half ago. Cosmometry, which we'll discuss, and the phi scaling angle. These are all topics which are just absolutely important to the pyramid's function. The phi scaling angle / Russian pyramid geometry in nature and in man-made objects. Russian pyramids and the geometry of DNA gets again to the method of action of the pyramids. And then next week, we won't get to this week, I'm going to start talking about some research that I'm just starting to do. A book named Interference by the author is Richard Merrick is just blowing me away in terms of the information that's there. So anyway, that's sort of a summary of what we're going to be going over. And here's an intro to what will be discussed over the next 2 weeks. Russian pyramids are based upon recently rediscovered geometry used by mankind for thousands of years. Researcher David Wilcock is primarily responsible for bringing knowledge of the Russian pyramids to the West. In addition to information in his best-selling book, The Synchronicity Key, David did a 10-part series on the health, agricultural, environmental, and material science benefits detailed in the Russian pyramid research on his wisdom teaching series on Gaia TV during 2016. And it was literally just about 4 years ago right now that I found this information. It was at that time that I became interested in researching, building, and ultimately replicating the research originally done in Russia. Over the past 30 years, some of Russia's top scientists in the fields of torsion physics, medicine, agriculture, public health, material science, and related disciplines have done extensive testing on the properties of these pyramids and their beneficial effects. Only the abstracts of this extensive research have been made available in the West. Similarly, the sacred geometry of these pyramids, which is critical to their function, was unknown in the West until I was able to recreate it in late 2019. There is every reason to believe Russia considers this technology to be highly valuable. And the reason I say that, Dr. Alexander Golod states on the pyramids.ru website that revenues from the export of pyramid technology could potentially exceed those from the export of oil and natural gas for the Russian nation. So they look at this as really important information, and that's why, in my view, they are so closed about giving this information out. But since discovering the geometry, I put together, interdisciplinary results demonstrating the importance of these pyramids and the creative process in nature, as well as the use of this geometry in man-made structures. Russian torsion physics research, not easily accessible in the West, was the basis upon which I ascertained this unique geometry. Now, separately, Western researchers have demonstrated this geometry, which they call the phi spiral, and that was done by our author Marshall Lefferts, author of the newly released book Cosmometry, Exploring the Holofractal Nature of the Cosmos, and shows that this is fundamental to the creative process in nature, being the geometry used by nature to scale all objects from the galactic to the subatomic. This geometry is the reason behind the pyramid's ability to clarify, harmonize, and amplify energy fields within its environment. This is all stuff we're going to try to go over today. Now, this section I just added this morning I was telling Lisa before the show that I've been getting up to read Richard Merrick's book early in the morning, so I'll have an hour, hour and a half of really quiet time where I can contemplate this. This is really heavy stuff that Merrick has put together about harmonics in the creative process. And so this last bullet point is one that I literally just added this morning because it's so profound. But what this bullet says is the significance of these findings is further confirmed by the research of Richard Merrick in his book, Interference, a Grand Scientific Musical Theory. In that book, Merrick demonstrates through, this is putting it politely, mathematically rigorous harmonic studies that the phi scaling angle, which is the geometry of this pyramid, produces, amplifies, and clarifies standing waves. But in addition, and this is what I found out just this morning, Merrick's work demonstrates how the phi scaling angle, or this geometry, is used by nature to convert standing wave frequencies into geometric shapes. And this looks to be the missing link in scientifically demonstrating how vibrations or waves are converted into physical form. So for those of you who are familiar with the concept of the Platonic solids, you know that the basic concept that has been handed down since Plato's time is that the circle is the beginning and basically the end form. It's the easiest form from which to create all other objects. But what this information that I was just reading this morning demonstrates is that the scale that we use in our contemporary Western culture, the 12-tone scale, can actually be converted into geometric shapes because of the phi scaling angle. So lots to talk about over the next 2 weeks. Going on now, just a brief summary. You all who've been listening know about the foundation, but we founded this for the purpose of scientific study of pyramids and their benefits to humanity and the planet. We incorporated the foundation last year as a Pennsylvania nonprofit corporation, and we were recently designated as a tax-exempt 501c3 organization by the Internal Revenue Service. And once again, if you're interested in providing some tax-exempt or tax-deductible contributions, go to pyramidsciencefoundation.org, and on the homepage, you'll find a place where you can donate to these efforts. And the purpose of the foundation—
I just put the address. Oh, sorry, Charlie. I just put the address in the live stream for people to click on.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. The purpose of the foundation is to conduct and disseminate scientific research demonstrating the value of pyramids in the areas of physical and behavioral health, environmental remediation, agricultural production, material science, and the affiliated areas of research. And as part of that research effort, we will be examining the numerous factors affecting pyramid energy and performance, including geometry, size, building materials, energy enhancements, location, color, and other factors. So that's a summary. This is not probably relevant to all of you, except that I want you to know that we are looking to do this research and to put it out on an open source basis. Any need that we may find in our search for research funding that might require us to patent and or trademark or license, we're going to try to we will maintain control of the intellectual property, and if necessary, license that out to appropriate parties. But we want this information, as you're going to find, has been known for thousands of years and it's been lost. So we want to do whatever we can as we rediscover all of this information and technology to make it available to the people and not allow it to be buried by the purchase or licensing or patenting of this technology by corporations. So now to begin, the presentation itself. What are Russian pyramids? They're the most thoroughly researched pyramids on the planet. Moscow scientist and defense engineer Dr. Alexander Golod began building these pyramids within Russia and Ukraine in 1990. Construction and research was undertaken at the request of the government, of the Russian government, and the research was performed by teams of Russia's top military, medical, engineering, agricultural, and materials scientists. All Russian pyramids are built with non-metallic materials such as PVC pipe, as the research indicates that metal used in the pyramid structure causes its effects to be greatly reduced. The pyramids are built with a slant angle of 76.345 degrees, something that I have discovered, and we'll go through that process, which corresponds to the angle of the phi spiral and the phi scaling angle. All of these are topics that we'll be going through over the next 2 weeks. So before we begin the research, this is one of my favorite quotations from Dr. Golod. When I saw this on the pyramids.ru website a couple of years ago, I really didn't know what to make of it, but I'm starting to understand it, and that's because of an awful lot of scientific research that I've been doing. But the quote goes as follows: "The field structure of any object, be it a mineral, a solution, cellular tissue, or a living creature, undergoes major changes in the area of impact of the pyramid. These structures become ordered, optimal, and harmonious. In this zone, ordinary thought, thought forms, and simple wishes become part of the field structure, which increases the probability of events initiated in the pyramid field by this thought by many orders of magnitude. The power and strength of field structures ordered in this way increases dramatically as all components are in resonance," that's a key word, "with the shape of the pyramids, which is the state of harmony." And specifically with respect to the medical research that we're going to be talking about here in the next few minutes, he said the following about the enhanced immunity and reduction of infectious diseases. Very, very timely given our situation with COVID right now. The conducted studies that we're going to be talking about in a few minutes give us every reason to believe that it is easier to get rid of severe pathologies such as COVID-19 that might impact a city, country, or planet than it is for one patient. And I think that this is a real way to reduce the burden on healthcare. So we're going to start with a summary of the health research. These are just the line items. We're going to be talking about each one of these over the next half an hour or so. But these are just amazing research results that I know some of you have heard many times before. But for those of you who haven't, we're going to go through them all. The survival rate of mice exposed to the typhoid fever virus, the survival rate increased 10 times or 1,000%. And just so you make sure that you understand that, in the pyramid group, 60% of the mice survived the injection of the typhoid fever virus, whereas in the control group, only 6% did. So that's an amazing result. The pyramid produces dramatic antiviral effects. It improves lymphocyte proliferation and longevity, which are key to immune function. It 100% eliminated infant mortality in premature at-risk birth babies with severely compromised immune systems. It regulates and regenerates the size and function of the thymus gland, which is key for producing what are called T cells, which are key to the immune function in the body. It reduces airborne environmental poisoning, cancer, and infectious diseases by 90%. It increases blood platelet count. For those of you who may bleed easy or are not, their blood doesn't clot easily, this could be a big benefit to you. It improves the rate of healing for any type of injury. It dramatically lowers violent behavior. That should be in mice. In humans, you can see it's a draft. And reduces stress hormones dramatically. It dramatically reduces cancer and tumor growth, and it increases athletic endurance in test animals by 200%. So in other words, they could do something, if they could go run a mile before, they can now run 3 miles. So we'll go through these individually now. The first one we're going to talk about is this tenfold increase in the survival rate of mice. The methodology that was used, mice were kept in a pyramid in varying numbers, varying periods of time. After several days, the mice were infected with increasing doses of Salmonella typhimurium, a virus that results in symptoms similar to typhoid fever. The control group was supplied with mice from the same strain, so there wasn't any issue with, were the mice different, varieties or different genetics. And the mice were contaminated with the same doses of culture in the control group, but without exposure to the pyramid field. So this is a true controlled experiment. The results were that the survival rate of mice who received exposure to the pyramid field greatly exceeded those in the control group. At smaller doses of contamination, 60% of the mice exposed to the pyramid survived versus 6% in the control group. At larger or higher doses of concentration, only 30% of the mice exposed to the pyramid field survived versus just 3% in the control group. So irrespective of the dosage limit, it looked like there's a factor of a tenfold increase in survival rate. So that's just an amazing statistic. So the conclusion that the scientists in Russia came to was that exposure of mice to the pyramid field promotes the heightening of their resistance to consequent contamination of Salmonella typhimurium. And you notice that it says subsequent contamination. I'm going to say this from personal experience. I've been making these now for 4 years. I have not even had a sniffle in 4 years, not a day, not even a hint of illness. So I can personally attest to these results. And it says in conclusion, therefore, it is possible to speak about a powerful immuno-enhancing influence of the pyramid, as mice exposed to the pyramid prior to contamination had survival rates that were 10 times higher than that of the control group. That in and of itself is enough research to start the foundation. But we're going to continue on. This is another set of studies that were done. And this one's entitled Russian Geometry Pyramid Provides Dramatic Antiviral and Anti-Cancer Effects. This one is going to take a little bit more time to go through because it's a little bit more complex. But I think it's important to get these concepts down so people can understand the method of action a little bit with the pyramid. But anyway, the antiviral activity, and again, COVID-19 is a virus. It is a class called a coronavirus, which has been around for 60 years. So when we talk about antiviral activity, it is directly related. This research is directly related. The antiviral activity of the drug venoglobulin was determined by its capacity to protect mice cells from cytopathic or cell-destroying impact of what's called the EMC virus, which is encephalomyocarditis. Now, I want to go over what venoglobulin is. For those of you who are unfamiliar with it, it's really not a drug. That's the way it was translated from the Russian. But this is actually one of these situations where you go in and you withdraw blood from a healthy individual who has developed immunity, and you take certain portions like the leukocytes and so forth from that blood, and this particular mixture is called venoglobulin. So this is not really a drug. This is actually human immune function, cells and so forth that are extracted from a healthy body, just to make that clear. But the drug was tested in two concentrations, 50 and 0.5 micrograms per milliliter. And then a portion of the solutions were housed in the pyramid. Venoglobulin was deposited after that into cell-like cultures for 24 hours prior to their contamination with the virus. So again, what we've got here, we've got a venoglobulin solution, one of which was stored under the pyramid, one was not. They were put into cultures before they contaminated them with the EMC virus. So now to the results. It was found that venoglobulin in the higher concentration, the 50 micrograms per liter, lowered the breeding capacity of the virus by about 300%, which makes perfect sense because the venoglobulin would have had the antibodies and the T cells and so forth from a healthy individual who had developed immune function for it. However, when the concentration of that venoglobulin solution was reduced 100-fold from 50 micrograms to 0.5 micrograms per milliliter, the effect was no longer observed. So what that's saying is it was diluted, and it was so diluted that it didn't have any impact at that lower concentration. However, the 0.5 microgram per milliliter solution of venoglobulin housed in the pyramid was actually 150% more effective than the 50 microgram per milliliter dosage not housed in the pyramid. So again, to review, even though the lower concentration of venoglobulin had no impact, when you used the lower concentration of the venoglobulin stored in the pyramid, it was actually more powerful than the higher concentration of the venoglobulin that had not been stored in the pyramid. And an enhanced antiviral effect of the venoglobulin housed in the pyramid was maintained at further higher dilutions. Hold on just a second. Oh, goodness. There we go. I had something pop up on my screen. Was made let me start over. An enhanced antiviral effect of the venoglobulin was maintained at the lower dilutions up to 0.005 and 0.0005 micrograms per milliliter, pointing to the importance of the direct exposure of the solution to the pyramid as the cause for the decreased breeding capacity of the virus. So even though they didn't do this study without any of the venoglobulin, they diluted it so much and the effect was still there that they have come to the conclusion that it wasn't even the slightest exposure or the concentration of the venoglobulin that was providing the antiviral effect. It was the fact that it had been exposed to the pyramid. So the last paragraph, a similar picture was observed when the mice were injected with various carcinogens. Mice in the experimental group drank water exposed in the pyramid. The control group drank ordinary water. The result, the probability of tumors developing in the control group was several times higher than for the animals that drank water exposed in the pyramid. So we've got numerous examples here of cancer, carcinogens, antiviral activity, all of which were dramatically reduced by exposure either directly or indirectly to the pyramid.
Hey, Charlie, we just see your green. Okay, now it's coming back. It popped onto the green screen for a while.
Oh, sorry. Okay. All right. So you can see it now?
Yep.
Okay. All right. The next one that comes up, this is a fascinating one for public health. Russian geometry pyramid reduces airborne environmental poisoning, cancer, and infectious disease deaths by 90%. I'll read this to you and give you a little bit of background, but there's a gas condensate plant in Astrakhan, Russia, and it had been poisoning and polluting the surrounding environment, spewing huge amounts of radon, hydrogen sulfide, and other environmental toxins into the air. By way of context, this facility had been around during the old Soviet Union, and there had never been any attempts to mitigate the pollution from this plant. And due to the extent of the pollution, all of the villages within a 30-kilometer, which is 19-mile zone, had been resettled away because of the huge toxicity. However, the city of Narimanov, which is 40 kilometers or 25 miles away, had not been evacuated, and that city is downwind from the plant, and it was still being severely affected by the environmental pollution and the associated deaths and from the environmental toxins. So the director of the plant went to send a representative to discuss with Dr. Golod constructing a Russian geometry plant, and it was built about halfway between the plant and the city on what's called the Volgograd-Astrakhan highway. So data collected by the city health department indicated that prior to the installation of the pyramid, there was an average of 550 to 650 cases of environmental poisoning per year. In the first year after construction of the pyramid, the number of reported poisoning cases dropped to 208. A year later, it was down to 70. And the following year, there were only a few isolated poisoning cases. And a few years after that, the city health department stopped keeping statistics because of the drastic decline in the reported poisonings. So what that's saying is virtually an elimination, even though the plant was still spewing out these toxins, of any sort of environmental related deaths or disease as a result of putting that pyramid midway between the source of pollution and the city. And the final paragraph, in similar experiments, circular contours of pieces of granite and quartz that had been put into the pyramid were spread around areas around Moscow and the Moscow region. And they had dramatic decreases in infectious diseases as a result of those activities as well. So, just continuous examples here of how the pyramid is reducing infectious diseases dramatically. Now, here's the one about the babies, and this one probably is the most, powerful to me, just because I had a bad immune function when I was born. For some reason, I was at least I was susceptible to pneumonia and asthma, I'll put it that way, as a small child. So I can empathize with this. But the research that was done investigated the influence of a 40% solution of glucose in distilled water. And I will tell you, it's not the glucose that had any impact here, but that's the way they structured the experiment. And then
screen again.
What's that?
The screen is green again, Charlie.
Huh.
Okay, it's up now. It's still green around the back of it, but we can see the slide now.
Okay. Let me get the next. There we go. Can you see it now?
Yeah, Zoom is acting funny today. It keeps kicking me off. I've had to come back on a couple times already.
No, okay. Well, my apologies, everyone. But anyway, the research, they administered this solution to 20 premature babies with compromised immune systems who would normally have died within a few days. And the reason they can make that statement is they were using a standardized assessment called the Instantaneous State Index, which measures certain vital signs in the premature baby and reflects the state of the baby's adrenal system, which is highly correlated with the immune function. And with these highly immune compromised babies, based on the results of the ISI, all the babies that were included in this test were expected to die within the first few days. And I'm sure that was the basis upon which they got permission to try to do this study. Well, the results were that data on the 20 patients was analyzed in all cases, even in patients with very low indices close to zero, after the administration of 1 milliliter of this solution that had been stored inside the pyramid. The ISI, or the Instantaneous State Index, rose substantially and practically to normal levels. The same happened after the external application of water only that had been exposed in the pyramid. And all of these babies survived. So they took, again, a 100% survival rate from a group that was expected to have 100% death rate. All right, the next one we're going to talk about is, I got something up on my screen again. My apologies, folks. I can't see the screen myself. There we go. Russian geometry pyramid energy dramatically reduces prisoner violent behavior. For those of you interested in violent behavior in people, in relationships and so forth, this is a huge study in my opinion. And I can tell you that personally, having lived with these pyramids now for 4 years, I'm certainly a lot calmer and much more at peace than I've been in my whole life. But anyway,
Charlie,
the purpose. Yes, Jack.
you're green again.
Okay. Can you see it, Jack?
Now I can.
Yes, you can.
Yes, I can.
Okay. Okay. So the purpose of this study was to determine the impact on behavior of storing table salt in the pyramid and distributing it to a population of 6,000 prisoners. The methodology: over 5 tons of table salt were stored in a Russian geometry pyramid. The salt was then distributed and used for cooking and table use by the nutrition services of prisons within the Russian Federal Penitentiary Service, housing over 6,000 prisoners. And the results: the incidence of criminal behavior in the prisons virtually disappeared within a few months, suggesting a corresponding increase in feelings of peacefulness and goodwill among the inmates. According to Dr. Golod, after 6 months of using the table salt, the employees of these institutions had the same basic idea, namely that, quote, the prisoners were acting so much nicer that people wondered whether we had somehow replaced the entire prisoner population. After 11 months, the following statistics were calculated. The death rate in the prisons dropped by 3.5 times. Serious crimes went to 0, and the number of rule violations decreased 3-fold. So this experience led Dr. Golod to study the mechanism of what had happened with the prisoners, and subsequent tests that we're going to show that were done with mice showed reduced aggressiveness after drinking pyramid water solutions, and demonstrated, in the words of Dr. Golod, an acquired resistance stress. And here's that follow-up study on mice that Golod was referring to. Studies were conducted on the effect on a group of mice by placing 1 gram pieces of crystalline gypsum previously placed in the Russian pyramid, but they were placed next to the cell of the mice. The control group was not so exposed. For 5 days, the number of fights in the cells was counted using a microphone system. And I think what they were doing basically was they were just trying to see when there was a raised volume of noise and that they could consider, tussling or fighting amongst the mice. So the number of fights in the experimental group on average was 3.5 times lower than in the control group. And interestingly enough, we'll get to this later, but the thymus cellularity indices on these mice was optimized, and we'll get to that in a few minutes. But thymus cell activity and size are highly correlated with immune function. And I might as well digress here. This is not in the slides, but for those of you who are familiar with Bruce Lipton has done some recent videos, little 5-minute things that you can go watch. But he talks about how fear of the COVID virus is actually worse for you than the virus itself, because it's fear, it's anger, it's any sort of low vibrational mental state that reduces your immune function. And it also and it has a secondary effect of reducing the viability and the amount of T cells that are in your bloodstream. So for those of you who are obsessing about this, you're actually doing more harm by worrying about this. Take reasonable precautions, but if you're living in fear, your immune system is going to make you sick more so, most likely, than the COVID virus itself. So once again, peaceful thoughts of peacefulness are going to improve your immune function and improve it in a major way. And on the converse, any thoughts of anger and fear are going to reduce your immune function and make you much more likely to get sick from any cause. Now here's...
Like energy attracts like energy.
That is so true. So I'm going to zip through some of this here. This is a study about human biofield auras. They used what is called gas discharge visualization. In Russia, it was developed by a Russian named Konstantin Korotkov. And they had people stay in the pyramid for 6 hours inside the pyramid energy field, and they saw tremendous changes in the aura. I've done this myself using the WinAura system of aura photography, and I only sat in it for 30 minutes. And I've done those studies as well, showing that there's a dramatic impact in the my aura, and also the energy and the balance of my chakra fields. So this is just more subjective information. Here's one that is really key in terms of how your immune function is improved. This study looked at pyramid water improving lymphocyte proliferation and longevity. Lymphocytes are the white blood cells that contain your immune function. So given the demonstrated importance of lymphocyte proliferation and longevity in immune function, and that has been demonstrated numerous times in other studies, essentially showing that if you don't have long-lived and a large number of lymphocyte cells, your body is not going to have the immune response, both in terms of the immediacy, but also the memory of previous diseases at its disposal. And again, with respect to COVID-19, this is a coronavirus, and most of the scientists who've studied this concur, not so much on the media, but those outside of the paid media will tell you that if you've been exposed to the coronavirus, even if there's a variation in the strain and you have a good immune function, you're going to have sufficient immune memory to be able to respond quickly and effectively, and certainly much more so than those who have not been either so previously exposed or who have compromised immune systems. So anyway, the methodology, a study of the effects of the pyramid water on human lymphoblast cells was analyzed. In the experimental group, water placed inside the pyramid was used to prepare a solution of nutrient growth medium, whereas in the control group, water that had not been exposed to the water was used. And cell viability, which means how many of these cells are still alive, was determined by staining the cells with various types of dyes that are used for this purpose. Now, by day 10, there was a noticeable increase in the numbers of cells and the percentage of cell viability in the treated exposure, meaning that used with the pyramid water versus the control group. On day 11, the values showed that there were 1.2 million cells and in the control group, of which 52% or 622,000 were still alive. But in the group with, this started, I believe, with 1 million cells. I forgot to mention that. So there had been a small increase in cells, and the viability or those percentage alive was 52%. However, in the group exposed to the pyramid water, you had 1.4 million cells, so you'd had twice the number of growths of cells, but much more importantly, there were 88% that were still alive or viable. So at the end of 11 days, you had 1.2 million cells alive versus 622,000 with the water. But it even becomes more dramatic on day 21 because in the control group, you only had 2% of the cells that were still viable, and that was a total of 1,000 cells, whereas there were 147,000 cells still alive and viable in the pyramid group. So literally 100 times as many long-lived cells in the solution that was exposed to the pyramid water. And once again, the longevity of these cells, the longer they can live, the more extensive the immune function memory in the human body. All right, pyramid increases blood platelet count. For those of you, again, who don't clot easily, this may be important to you. If you have thrombocytopenia, changes in the blood coagulation system of rabbits was studied when replacing normal drinking water with water exposed in the pyramid were investigated. And the studies were conducted for 14 days. The results, the number of platelets of the rabbit before introduction of the pyramid water was taken as the base as 100%. So on the 7th day after the start of the experiment, the number of platelets in the rabbit cells, those who were drinking the pyramid water, rose to 129%, and by the end of the 14th day had risen to 167% of what they had been prior to the introduction of the pyramid water. So again, indicating pyramid exposure as a natural method for alleviating thrombocytopenia or low blood platelet count. Now, for what I think is probably in terms of immune function, maybe the most important experiment to talk about. The Russian pyramid improves thymus function and regulation. The experimental group in this experiment of mice received a 10% salt to water solution where the salt was stored inside a 22-meter pyramid before being administered to the mice. The control group got the same, except the salt was not exposed to the pyramid. Now, the solutions were administered at the rate of 5 drops per day. A double-blind control scheme was applied, and the employees didn't know the state of the thymus glands of each of the mice and did not know which groups were in the control and which were experimental. So it was truly a double-blind experiment. Now for the results. In the experiment, the number of thymus cells in the mice was calculated. And it's been determined through other research that the size of the thymus cell, the number of thymus cells, and by extension, thyroid and immune system function decreases greatly with age and stress. In human beings, after about the age of 20, you start to see a progressive but constant decline in the size of the thymus gland. And there's highly correlative studies that show that as that thymus gland becomes smaller and turns into fatty tissue, the immune function of the human body goes downhill. And that's the major reason why most elderly people have compromised immune function. So just by way of background, that's kind of what we're trying to do here. We're going to see what happens here in just a moment. In the control group, the number of thymus cells in the mice, and they studied all of them, a big study. So there was a wide variation in the number of thymus cells, and it ranged from 0.1 to 28 times 10 to the 7th number of cells. That absolute number is not really relevant, but you can see that there was a wide variation from 0.1 to 28. Now, in the pyramid group, the variation in the number of thymus cells varied much less dramatically and was only from 5 to 7.8 times 10 to the 7th. So those mice that earlier had much smaller thymus cell size, it had literally regenerated and regrown. And those that had enlarged thymuses for other conditions, that their thymus gland had been reduced in size such that the size of the thymus gland in the mice that had been exposed to the pyramid was within normal ranges in all cases. And thus the conclusion is it can be assumed that the effect of the salt to water solution from the pyramid was to optimize the size of the thymus, one of the indicators characterizing the immunological status of the organism. So if people want to, if people say, oh, how can you be sure that that's what this really is? Well, we've got scientific data here proving that the pyramid exposure to these energy fields has a dramatic and direct impact on regulating the size of the thymus, which in turn has a direct impact on immune function. So here's some other anecdotal information quickly. Dr. Golod placed an 11-meter high pyramid on a hospital in Russia. The hospital doctors indicated that it was extremely effective in speeding the healing process for all of the patients who had had surgery in the hospital. And we actually have a picture of that. I didn't have time to put it in here, but we did find several months ago a picture of that hospital in Russia with the pyramid on it. Another area that I think is just amazing, has some amazing potential, is in drug and alcohol addiction recovery. David Wilcock actually makes this statement early on in one of the wisdom teaching series, that in the zone of the pyramid, objects or drugs that have a psychotropic effect, that effect dramatically decreases in and around the pyramid. So the effects of marijuana, alcohol, other types of drugs is going to be substantially reduced. But more importantly, there's very encouraging data about using solutions such as glucose or isotonic solutions. You could just use water that have been exposed to the pyramid and have the patients drink it, and they had extremely positive results in terms of helping with alcoholism and drug addiction, even in very advanced forms. Now we talked about this earlier. We have done some studies within the last 6 months with the Lecker antenna, indicating that EMF frequencies can be harmful. EMF frequencies can be remediated or harmonized through exposure to the Russian pyramid. We used a device called the Lecker antenna, which is a scientific instrument for qualitative detection of energy fields, developed about 100 years ago by an Austrian physicist named Ernst Lecker. But we were able to demonstrate there's a specific frequency there of electromagnetic pollution, and that it was not detected within the pyramid or areas outside the pyramid within its field of influence. And the volume of area benefiting from such remediation was found to be a function both of the size of the pyramid used as well as the type of energy enhancements, crystals, capstones, quartz sand, etc. So at least with respect to that, we know that that's the case. As we discussed earlier today, I'm quite concerned about the introduction of 5G. This is going to be my very next area. I want to figure out how we can get experimentation on 5G to a whole new level, because I think this is perhaps the most important area of research on a going forward basis, is how to protect ourselves from 5G. Lastly, we'll talk about athletic endurance. For those of you who are athletes, I'll tell you, I'm almost 68 now. I go to the gym, and I'm just amazed that I'm able to do what I can and do it with such ease. So it doesn't make you more muscular, but it does help with your endurance. And the goal here was to determine if there was an impact on endurance through exposure to pyramids. They exposed rabbits and white rats to the pyramid and then controlled their activity levels to control groups for endurance. And the results were that animals exposed to the pyramid gained 200% more endurance than control group animals, and their blood gained higher concentrations of leukocytes, again, directly related to immune function. So that is pretty much the summary of the health aspects of the pyramids. We've still got some time today, so I'm going to start to go over, get into the next topic, which is sacred geometry and the pyramid's method of action. So by way of introduction, knowledge of sacred geometry and its expanded field of study, now known as cosmometry, has been around for thousands of years. Sacred geometry is found not only throughout nature, but also in the architecture of mankind that spans thousands of years. For a variety of reasons, this knowledge has been lost and suppressed. Recently, researchers from a number of disciplines have been rediscovering this knowledge in numerous areas of study. Marshall Lefferts, who I mentioned earlier, published a book last year entitled Cosmometry, Exploring the Holofractal Nature of the Cosmos. This is, in my book, the most comprehensive study of the cosmometry itself is the study of the fundamental patterns, structures, processes, and systems that are inherent in manifestation at all scales within the cosmos. And manifestation here means taking something from pure thought, high vibration, down to the physical. Research in Lefferts' book as well as that of leading torsion physicists, scalar wave scientists, medical doctors, and others, point to the use of sacred geometry in structuring and organizing all aspects of existence. And our own research into the use of this geometry in architecture around the world helps provide concrete evidence of the historical use of this geometry and dates knowledge of this specific geometry to at least 2000 BCE. So on the following pages, we're going to be introduced to the latest scientific theories demonstrating why this unique pyramid geometry manifests the beneficial qualities that we've described. To begin with, we're going to go back and discuss what the phi ratio, what phi is and what the golden ratio is. Phi, again, can be expressed, for those of you unfamiliar with it, you'll see it there in the middle of the page. It's an irrational infinite fraction, 1.61803998887 and so forth. The way it's derived and its unique mathematical properties are shown in the diagram above. This is the only ratio that will allow somebody or one to do this, or for nature to do this, and it's used as a scaling constant as a result. To take the equation A is to B, in other words, the ratio of A to B is the same as the ratio of the sum of A plus B to A. So think about that for a minute, and that number again is 1.618. So what we're saying here in this example is that segment A is 1.618 times as long as segment B. But if you add those two together, the two together are 1.618 times the size of A. So this is a way for nature to scale things both larger and smaller, and it works both ways. So if you take segment B and multiply it by phi, or 1.618, then it becomes the size of A. And similarly, if you multiply A by 1.618, you get the sum of those two numbers, or two figures, are A plus B. So given its unique ability in nature to scale objects both larger and smaller, this ratio is found in nature and is used by nature to scale objects of all sizes, literally from the galactic to the subatomic. We're going to show here, for those of you, some of you have seen this before, that the other major pyramid geometries that we're all familiar with, the Giza, the Nubian, and the Golden Pyramids, all have at least one element of phi in their two-dimensional geometry, and we'll go over that in a second. However, when I began trying to figure out how to build these pyramids, there is no two-dimensional phi relationship that can be found in the Russian pyramid geometry. Before we go and look at the pyramids, though, I want to relate to you, because this is going to become important next week, that phi, this 1.618 constant, can also be derived through what's called the Fibonacci series. And I want you to see this in a graphic perspective. We'll come back to this probably next week and review it. But as you all know, the Fibonacci series says that you take two numbers, and you start with one and say, use one again. You start with one, and one is the first two numbers. And from that point forward, the third number is always equal to the sum of the first two numbers. And then the fourth number is the sum of the second and third. So in other words, if you have 1 and 1 as your first two, you would add those two together, and your third number would be 2. And then for your fourth number, you would add 1 and 2, and you'd get 3. And then the next number would be 2 and 3. 2 plus 3, you'd get 5. Then you'd add 5 plus 3 to get 8, 8 plus 5 to get 13, and so forth. So you get the idea of how that works. Now, when you another way of deriving phi, other than with the proportional methodology that we saw on the previous page, you can also arrive at the approximation of phi by taking successive ratios of the numbers in the Fibonacci series and plotting those on a graph. And that's what's done on the bottom of this page. This isn't, once you get the idea, you'll see it's pretty straightforward, but we take the second number, or the third number in that series, which is 2, and divide it by the second one, which is 1, and we plot that ratio, and that ratio is 2. But now we take the next set of numbers, the next one in the list would be 3, and we divide it by the second number, which is 2, and we get a ratio of 1.5, which is right here. Then you take 5 divided by 3, and you get a ratio of 1.625. And then you take the next series ratio, which is 8 divided by 5, and you see you keep doing this, and what happens is you see the dotted line, which is phi, which is 1.618, and you alternate around this number through these successive ratios. And as the information above the diagram says, phi is that the symbol for phi is shown on the dotted line. Phi is an irrational number that is approximately 1.618033979887. Any number in the Fibonacci sequence divided by the number before it, shown here, approaches phi as we go to infinity. So phi is not something that you can, that you'll ever come, there is no absolute end to it, but this is a very good approximation to it. But it's important because this is an important concept when we start to get into harmonics, that phi is an irrational number and does not have any association with any whole number ratio that exists. All right, the next topic, I'll go through the various geometries of pyramids. You look on the top left, I mentioned to you, well, we'll read what I have down here. A two-dimensional phi relationship can be found in all major geometries as shown. However, no such relationship exists for the Russian pyramid. As the exact dimensions and sacred geometry of these pyramids has never been revealed in the West, the first thing I had to do was to find that geometry, and I found it in a unique three-dimensional phi relationship, which we'll talk about in a bit. And this inspiration came from a discovery from reading some torsion physics research of Dr. Anatoly Akimov, as well as the research of David Wilcock. We're going to get to that in a minute, but I want to go over again the math. Hopefully this isn't boring everybody too much, but I think it's important that you see, once you see this research here in a minute, that the reason why you go find phi in all of these geometric forms and its importance. So in the Giza pyramid, the slant height, which is, say, from the top down to the side of any of these two-dimensional pyramids, if you take that slant height and divide it by 1/2 of the base length of the pyramid, you get a relationship of phi. In the Golden pyramid, you take that same slant height, but you divide it by the entire base length, and you get a ratio of phi. On the bottom right, if you look at the Nubian pyramid, you take just the height of the pyramid itself and divide it by the base length, and you get a ratio of phi. But no such relationship exists within the Russian pyramid structure. You'll see that I have a question mark underneath it because no one knew at this point exactly what the sacred geometry was. We only had an approximation of the slant angle, which came from some information on the pyramids.ru website, but we had no precision from which to continue to work, and no idea as to what the sacred geometry really was. So the way I was able to divine this, I was reading David Wilcock's book, Divine Cosmos. And in that, he had a section on the torsion physics research of Dr. Anatoly Yakimov, and he's a Russian torsion physicist that published an article that we're going to talk about here in a second, about 1990, just about the time that Dr. Golod began building these pyramids. And initially, I thought that perhaps Golod was onto his research, and he may have been. That may have been the way he figured it out. But nonetheless, what David Wilcock had to say in his book on this research was that from Dr. Akimov's research, it was determined that the best passive torsion generator, I'll explain that in a minute, was formed by a cone. It could be a pyramid as well, but he was looking at cones that were shaped into the phi ratio. Now, what's a passive torsion generator? That's their fancy term for an energy generator or chi energy. So that's what they mean by passive torsion generator. It's an object that can generate an energy field on its own. And what this tells us,
Hey, Charlie, your screen.
Yep.
Sorry, your screen's green again.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll try again.
I just got kicked off again as well, so I just came back on.
Can you see it now?
Oh, there you go. It's up now.
This is so strange. Okay.
I know.
So what this tells us is, according to Wilcock, and we'll talk about this in a minute, what this tells us is that torsion waves are indeed phi spirals, since a cone that duplicates this pattern will harness the waves most strongly. Now, that just got my creative juices going, and I said I had to get a copy of this article, and so I set off for it. I've told this story before, but I think it's worth repeating. I went to my local library and said that I'd like a copy of this article. They said they'd go out and look for it on interlibrary loan. They called me back in about 2 days and said the Library of Congress responded, said they have a copy and they'll send it to me in a week. Well, 1 week turned into 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Every week I'd call and they didn't have any information. And the Library of Congress all of a sudden said they couldn't find the document. Well, this is so important. This fundamental research is so important that I kind of get the feeling that somebody was told not to send this out. So I ended up having to go to London to get this. It's a very short 3-page article, but I don't let the brevity of the article, distract from its importance. So what I want to do is to talk about this. What it basically says is as follows. This is the key paragraph. The plane geometry of the physical vacuum, and I have to translate this because of their nomenclature. Physical vacuum is just Dr. Akimov's term for the ether or for the scalar fields, is distorted by means of macro bodies, which are nothing more than physical objects of a certain size and shape, and thus spinor or torsion fields of considerable strength can be created. This is all translated from Russian, and that's why it's so challenging. But essentially what he's saying is that the ether can be, that the energy in the ether can be captured and enhanced by specific objects that conform to specific principles. And here's the key sentence. If the bodies have geometric dimensions with fulfillment of the golden section or phi, then they can play the role of concentrators of the torsion field. So what does that tell us? Why do all of these pyramids have a phi relationship? Because what Akimov is telling us is that anything with phi involved in its geometry is going to have this ability. to greater or lesser degrees. Now, if we go back to Wilcox's second paragraph here, you can see that that statement doesn't tell us anything about using a phi spiral or that a phi spiral is the necessary condition. However, that was the sentence that got me thinking in the direction of the phi spiral. And so, to continue on, although other research indicated that torsion fields moved in spirals, I couldn't figure out how David Wilcox came to that conclusion from Dr. Akimov's research, as Akimov's research only spoke to the necessity of the geometry conforming in some way to phi. However, his conclusion did point me in the right direction, as it forced me to think in terms of a three-dimensional phi relationship for the Russian pyramid sacred geometry. And so what I envisioned was a series of stacked circles or spheres whose diameters decrease by phi as shown. This was actually the picture in the center of the page was actually my logo for a while. This was the way I envisioned it. I knew that torsion fields did move in spirals and that they did move in a clockwise direction coming up from the earth. So I developed, and Lisa helped me with this in the early days of putting this together as a logo. So the resulting pyramid that came about as a result of this ended up with a slant angle of 76.345 degrees, which was extremely close to the rough estimate of 76.1 that was derived from the available information on Golod's website. So this results in a three-dimensional phi relationship of the phi spiral rather than the two-dimensional relationship that we had seen in the other pyramids. And I think since it's about time to close up, I think I'm going to stop there, and we will pick up on this next week as we continue through to the second half of the presentation. So in conclusion, next week we will continue to explore not just geometry. We're going to get into some more fun stuff. We're going to show how this geometry is found all throughout nature. It's found in buildings, in hieroglyphs and so forth, and goes through some of that research as well. And then we're going to conclude by talking, as time permits, about Richard Merrick's studies on harmonics and how harmonics of this with this geometry, or that harmonics are created by this very geometry. So, Lisa, I'll stop. I don't know if there are any questions or comments that we need to look at. I don't have my phone up today, but
No, there aren't any comments. Not today.
not today. All right. Well, I must have bored everyone to tears.
No.
Anyway.
No, not at all.
If you do have questions during the week, just post them on the comments section today or get in touch with either of us, and we'll try to answer those next week. But until then, until next week, as always, we thank you for watching. Please tell your friends about Pyramid Quest and our new location on the Pyramid Science Foundation YouTube page. We thank you for watching, and you have a great day.
Bye, guys.